Welcome to Blizzic's obligatory Volume 5 Hopes and Predictions video. As always, I have a lot to say, and I want to be able to get this video out quickly, so I hope you'll forgive me for the lack of editing. Luckily, it's socially acceptable on YouTube to just stick some gameplay footage in the background and call the video good to go, so I'm just gonna be a lazy fuck-ass and do that. Also, I was gonna wait until after the Yang trailer dropped to lay down my predictions, but with the way things are shaping up, it seems like they're gonna release the Yang trailer like a couple of days before Volume 5 airs, so I don't want to be rushing to get out my analysis on the trailer and my predictions video all before the volume comes out. That would just suck. So I'm just going to do the video right now. Sorry. Let's lead off by talking about the plot of Volume 5 that doesn't have to do with individual character arcs, because while the plot department of RWBY is filled with calm, tired co-workers quietly chatting by the water cooler, there's a full-blown office-wide nerf war going on in the character department. Everyone has something going on, and everyone who doesn't either should or is going to in the future. So, regarding the overarching narrative, what do I think is going to happen? Fuck if I know. At the very least, Ranger, Crow, and Oscar are going to Haven. Whether they're going to enroll or go looking for bad guys or whatever, I have absolutely no idea where they're planning on taking the central narrative. But there is a certain direction that I hope they don't take, and that's continuing to establish normal life for the characters. Volume 1 established normal life, Volume 2 was just them living in it, Volume 3 tore it away, and then Volume 4 established how normal life has changed after the traumatic events of Volume 3. It was a good idea to pump the brakes a bit after Volume 3's insanity, pace things a little, but now that they have, they're going to need to kick things back up a notch. The most entertaining part of Volume 4 was the Ranger arc because it had a fairly continuous, propulsive story. Now that they've gotten all their setup out of the way, they need to start moving in a consistently engaging direction. In other words, the plot needs to be tight and fast-moving. The characters can't all just be sitting around doing nothing like in 3 out of the 4 Volume 4 arcs. There needs to be an overarching story that takes the spotlight in order to really take advantage of the freedom granted to the show by Volume 3. Now that the Disneyification of RWBY's storytelling has been erased and Volume 4 gave us a chance to breathe, they need to start demonstrating that they're willing to pull the trigger again. Tyrion jumping in, attacking Team Ranger, and stinging Crow is a pretty good example of what I mean. Have the characters fight the villains, have someone die, reveal some shocking information that isn't just another plot dump. It's time for the story to start moving in a consistent direction rather than just being endless setup for the future. And it's not like it's impossible for them to do this. The Headmaster is working for the main villain. There's these relics in circulation. The White Fang are on the move in Mistral. Something Spring Maiden. War seems like it's becoming more and more likely. There are plenty of directions that the show can go if it wants to tell a more propulsive, compelling story than, hey, look at these characters who live in this world where this happens. Speaking of characters, though, let's move on to the rest of the video. Ruby fucking Rose is in a really weird place as the protagonist. Her personality and character traits have been developed and are written consistently enough, but the only place where she really grows or becomes a new person at all is in Volume 1, which wouldn't be that strange if it wasn't for the fact that the situation she lived through should be having a profound effect on any sane human being, and that the writers avoiding growing her as a character is so noticeable it almost seems deliberate. Remember that time in Volume 2 when all the characters' motives and goals were elaborated on except Ruby's? On a surface level, she's really great, but she just has nothing going on, like a side character. Actually, that's false. She does have a lot going on. Her mother's death, the symbolism with the rose petals, her romanticized vision of the huntress profession, her silver eyes, her inability to fight without Crescent Rose, her innocent, blissfully ignorant view of the world being torn away by the reality of how everything is. Hell, I even heard she had to work through a fear of large crowds in the manga, which sounds like more character growth than she's ever had in the show. And geez, it must have been some pretty big character growth for her, since she has literally no problems performing for the entire planet during the Vital Festival. There's a lot of really cool stuff they can do with her, but it's all pushed into the background. Despite being the main character, she's never really focused on. This is something that I hope can be remedied in Volume 5, assuming they're not doing it on purpose for some later payoff like they did with the quirky tone in Volumes 1 and 2. I like Ruby just as much as the rest of you, but you don't really watch the show for her. You watch it for Weiss, Yang, Blake, Jean, Ren, Crow, even Sun at times. In that regard, she is less the protagonist of RWBY and more the mascot for it. Oscar might be the solution to the main character problem. He's only been briefly introduced in the show so far, and he's already a more compelling main character than RWBY, and I have a feeling he's going to take Ren and Nora's place in the spotlight in Volume 5. While not immediately telegraphed, that desire to be something more than some stupid farmer is very Star Wars. Relatable. And his brief character arc about accepting that he's not insane and accepting Ozpin's indefinite violation of his personal space as some weird kind of destiny was paced nicely and established him as a well-rounded character. And hey, now that he's headed to Haven, it gives the writers an opportunity to show us what it's like learning to be a huntsman from the ground up. I mean, they kinda did that with Jean, but it was more focused on his growth as a character than it was on the actual system and how he handles himself within it. Also, I think it's possible there could be a specific relationship between Oscar and RWBY in Volume 5. I touched on this briefly in my Q&A video, but it would make sense for Ozpin to point her out as the chick with the silver eyes, and he would also naturally gravitate toward her since they seem like they're about the same age and are about to go to a school where everyone is 2 years older than them. Whether or not it's a romantic relationship is something I don't give a single fuck about because I am not a shipper, obvious exceptions notwithstanding. While we're on the subject, I'm a bit worried for Ren and Nora as well. I just have this sinking feeling that now that they've gotten the character development they deserved, they're just going to go right back to having zero plot relevance. My opinion on them from Volume 4 still stands, they're the fucking best, but I'm hoping that they're not the fucking best in the background. I doubt they'll spend much time in the spotlight after what we got last volume, but I don't want them to completely sink into the background either. The only way I can really see them having relevance is if they focus on Nora for some reason, or if the duo discover who's behind the destruction of Shihon. They'd be naturally averse to bandits based on their background, which could possibly create some interesting face-off when Raven inevitably enters the picture. But even that seems far off, so I'm left wondering what they'll end up doing. But enough about characters I'm worried for. I haven't talked about the other RWBY girls, have I? I should probably do that. Weiss is going to see her sister in Mistral. Fuck yeah! I really enjoyed Winter during the 2 goddamn episodes she was present. Her relationship with Weiss was very interesting and complex. You can really tell that the 2 characters have one hell of a history. She exerts this air of cruelty with everyone she speaks to, and she seems especially harsh and unforgiving with Weiss. But in episode 4, you really do start to get that her overbearing control over her sister comes from the fact that she really does care about her underneath the surface, which is the embodiment of an older and younger sibling relationship. An entire volume where that relationship between them is fleshed out and Winter receives some more character development is fucking exactly what we need right now. And if the Weiss character short set the tone for Volume 5, it's highly likely that Weiss's Volume 5 arc will be a beauty to behold. So what about Blake? Well, as you can probably guess from the fact that Blake's trailer was actually an Elia trailer in disguise, it's highly likely Volume 5 will detail the relationship between Elia and Blake. And I'm totally down for that as well. As I said in my review of the Blake trailer, Elia seems like a completely interesting character who could be really fun to get to know and like. Their differing views on the White Fang and how they treat the oppression clashing in the open could be an excellent source of conflict, as well as Blake's reluctance to fight Elia due to their background and Sun's desire to get revenge on her. I don't really know how they're going to clash, but I know that when they will, it's going to be awesome. Also about Blake, in my Volume 4 review, I complained a lot about how bitchy and annoying she was. In Volume 1, she had this cool, mysterious air about her, where she just kinda didn't give a shit. More preoccupied with whatever's going on in her mind than she is with whatever's happening in front of her. I loved her back then, but then after Volume 3, she just turned into someone who cares so much about everything that she screams at Sun for existing at every opportunity. But then, right at the end of the volume, she showed some signs that she was actually going to open up and relax a bit, and I really hope we get to see that from her in Volume 5. I miss Volume 1 Blake, and if that My Hero comment is anything to go by, we could be getting her back. On to the last member of the team, Yang. Now, she's going to be a bit tough to talk about since her trailer hasn't released at the time this is being recorded, so my guesses are probably going to be completely wrong. At the end of Volume 4, I wasn't really sure if it specified whether she was going to go look for RWBY or her mother, but if she does go look for her mother, that's a pretty selfish, out-of-character decision for her, so she's probably looking for her sister. But what she's actually going to do in the meantime, I'm not really sure about. It's always possible her mom will come to her. Raven seems like she's just dipping in and out of being important to the story whenever she feels like it, so it wouldn't surprise me. Another thing I want to touch on is Yang's recovery, because I don't think she's fully recovered. I think she thinks she's fully recovered, but is actually going to struggle quite a bit with her PTSD in the future. Or at least I hope she will. It would suck if losing her arm in the events of Volume 3 didn't have any kind of lasting effect on her. Alright, well, who else is there to talk about? Crow! Crow is in the perfect place to finally get some character growth and further development. The debut of his semblance in Volume 4 was really cool, but it wasn't really explored in any meaningful way. We also had this small allusion to Summer's death in the form of Crow muttering to himself during a bad dream. Just on the surface layer of this character there is so much history, so I'm ecstatic at the thought of really diving in and learning all there is to learn about him. Neo. Huh? What was that? I'm sure it's nothing. I'll just, move on to the villains. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like a particularly opportune moment to develop Salem as anything more than a scheming big bad, so it seems like she's going to remain boring a little while longer. Maybe they'll keep her in the background now that they've introduced her so that her lack of development isn't as annoying. However, she seems kind of important to developing Cinder with the whole be a better fall maiden thing, and I do think that's the route they'll take since it still feels a little early for Cinder to come back in full. I'm okay with that though, so long as they start moving in a new direction with it. It was interesting enough in Volume 4 to merit a lot of interest here, and the more time Cinder spends away from the main cast, the more epic it's going to be when she inevitably faces them again. What the fuck was that? I'm sure I'm not imagining it. What the... Whatever, doesn't matter, back to business. I just want to briefly touch on Lionheart and Watts, since I'm sure they're going to be important, but I'm not exactly sure what angle they'll take. Lionheart at least is the cowardly lion, so I have a feeling he'll try to put on a brave face around his students, but in reality is a little bitch. Whether he's helping Salem out of fear for his own life or someone else's is unclear, but I'm pretty positive it's something along those lines. And then Watts didn't really get any characterization in Volume 4, so it's hard to predict what his purpose will be. We know he's at Haven, so maybe he's posing as a teacher? Other than that, it's kind of tough trying to predict a character's purpose in the narrative when you know jack shit about them. Neo! What the hell? What? Alright, fine! I'll talk about Neo. Jeez, calm down. Don't get me wrong, guys, I love Neo as much as the next guy, which is a lot. This fandom is enamored with her, and with good reason. She's fucking charming. I just don't have anything new to say about her. She's definitely not dead, she's definitely coming back, it's just a matter of when, where, and how. There, that's the general consensus. I'm looking forward to it, and it might be this volume, but beyond that, there isn't much to say. She's really just another wild card. Come to think of it, a lot of characters in this volume are basically wild cards. I don't know if that means this will be an exciting volume or not. Guess we'll find out soon. Before we wrap this up, there are two other topics I want to touch on. Will Team RWBY reunite in this volume? Not immediately, if at all. The reason why I say that is because Blake is still in Menagerie while everyone else is converging on Mistral, and I think it'd be kind of weird for Team RWBY to reunite without Blake. I mean, I guess that could be the point since Blake ran away, but I feel like it'd just be a strange choice to leave her out. If Blake suddenly finds some reason to go to Mistral in the middle of the volume, I think it's safe to say they'll be united by the end of the volume. Second question I want to answer, will someone die? Yes, or at least I hope so. Keeping Volume 4 death-free was a good strategic choice in order to bring us down from the crack-like high of Volume 3, but now is the moment to bring things back to the craziness from before. I don't know who would die, since, as I said, I don't really know what angle the plot is going to take, but I'm hoping it's someone. I don't want the show to be trigger-happy all the time, that'd get tiring, but if they want to keep their suspense up, they need to remind us how fragile our poor little characters really are. My inner fanboy is screaming at me for proclaiming this, but from an analytical standpoint, I think it's the right choice. But I could immediately change my mind on that, and like 90% of what I said in this video, once I get a handle on what's actually going to happen this volume. There's so much that's up in the air, this volume could be way different than any of us are expecting. Once things start rolling, it'll be a bit easier to predict, but until then, I'm lost. In conclusion, I don't have a fucking clue what's going to happen in Volume 5, and this entire video was pointless. See you guys next time, and remember...
Reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram, buy gold, buy...